A few days ago, we started working on our Evo 8. Things have gotten a little bit out of hand, and as you can see now, it is a bare shell with a lot of body damage that we need to take care of. This whole entire quarter panel needs to be replaced. Now, here's the problem. I have never ever replaced the quarter panel. I don't know what I'm doing. I've done a little bit of research. Shout out to Jack Builds It. So I have a brief idea based off of what he did, how to pull this quarter panel. Now the only problem is we need to find a new quarter panel, and there's also other parts, other body parts that we need that are also damaged. For example, the trunk pan and this rear frame rail. Now, before we do that, I do need to build some sort of little cart to wheel this thing around. There is no way to get the shell currently to the paint shop. So the first thing I want to do is build a nice rolling cart that the shell can sit on. 4 pieces of square tubing and 4 Harbor Freight special wheels. We ended up with a nice little setup. I've been needing a cart like this for so freaking long. $150 later, we're good to go. All my late night browsing on the marketplace paid off because I just found a car a couple hours away, but I want to go pick it up. What are you doing tomorrow? Want to go on a date? How'd you know? No, I actually do. A couple minutes of convincing later, Bobby and I were off to Seattle, about a 4-hour drive, to go check out this Evo I found on the marketplace. She was a bit crusty, it's not terrible, but it had a ton of parts that we needed, so I decided to load her up in the trailer, and we were back off to the shop. All right, we just got the old girl unloaded. Quick little rundown of this thing. Unsure on the miles, but fairly complete rolling shell. Interior is there, it's all torn apart. As you guys can see, no motor, no trans, no T-case. If we decide that we need a quarter, we have a good quarter here. If we need a door, we got a good door there. And the main thing that I needed out of this car was all the interior pieces. I debated using this shell for the build, but due to paperwork issues, I decided let's just stick with the black one. I'm always up for the challenge anyway. Yeah, we need to figure out if we're gonna use the quarter or not. I keep going back and forth. I really like the fact that all of the metal is all VIN matching, and I really want to keep it that way, being that this is a full-on restoration. All right, I finally made up my mind. We are going to attempt to use this quarter panel here and just fix it. We are going to have it PDR'd. Now here's the thing, we cannot get it PDR'd with all of this body filler in here, so let's set her on our newly built cart, wheel her outside, grab a wire wheel, go to town, and get all of this body filler stripped on out of here. I'm telling you, this cart is the nicest addition to the shop in years. We got her outside. I grabbed my wire wheel, spent probably 30 minutes just pulling out 1 billion pounds of body filler. This thing is so crusty, but it makes for a good old winter project. Slapped on some 80 grit on the DA sander. The PDR shop requested that there's a little bit of black paint on here so you can see what he's working with. So that's what we did. Look at that, beautiful. There, she's done. This thing is ready to go to PDR. That is not for a few days. So in the meantime, let's start working on trying to get the floor pan in the trunk and also that frame rail underneath straightened out and or replaced. I do not have a frame rack here, but I do have a pretty good idea of what I want to do. All right, so here we have what you call a frame rack, a Devin Niemela style frame rack. The front rail is anchored to the truck, which we all know that thing is not going anywhere. And then the back, we have a chain wrapped around the bumper beam because it's this rail where the bumper beam bolts on that is bent. Chain wrapped around that, hooked to the come along, hooked to this concreted in beam. The goal here is to use that guy to pull this guy back out. Hopefully, at minimum, pulling that straight. And I have a feeling we're gonna replace the rail anyway, but we need to get this back to where it belongs, this pan back to where it belongs. Now I don't know if this is gonna work, but let's try. With some tension on the frame rail, I grab a hammer, trying to hammer that frame rail straight. It's not really working, but I think I'm gonna replace it anyway. So I decided to move on to the trunk pan. I really don't want to replace the trunk pan if I don't have to, so we'll see what we can do. getting there. It's gonna take a while. Hopefully I can get her done before dark so I can get her back in the shop and hopefully replace that rail. My main goal right now is just getting this floor pan back to where it should be. I feel like if we pull the frame rail off, that's gonna release a lot of tension on the trunk pan and we should be able to get her straightened out a little bit easier. Just got the bumper beam off. I'm super happy with how everything's coming out. Of course, we do have a ways to go. So right now, I'm gonna go ahead and pull off this piece right here. This is spot welded onto the body up here and onto the body back here. The plan is to get this piece off, get this car outside, get the parts car in here, pull the parts car rail off because you cannot buy them from Mitsubishi, and then get that out of here, get this car back on the lift, and make whatever adjustments we need to get the new one to fit. You can either use a drill and a drill bit or a belt sander to pop the spot welds. I find the belt sander is a little bit easier to work with, so that's what we're using. About 20 spot welds later, the frame rail is loose and ready to come off, just in time for the entire car to leave to her appointment. Now before we go ahead and get the rail cut off the old car and put it onto the new car, we are out of time because this car has a freaking appointment. That's right, my friends. This car is going to the sandblaster, the whole undercarriage, and the engine bay as well is getting sandblasted. Very, very excited for this because this is just going to take the car to the next level. I debated having the body of the car blasted as well, but I decided not to because sometimes it can warp the metal and that would be a nightmare to deal with. I was super freaking excited to get this thing blasted. The undercarriage, as you guys have seen, is an absolute disaster on this thing. Engine bay, not so bad, but being that it's already going to be at the blast shop, I figured let's have the bay done as well. Seeing this setup in person was super cool to witness. Now, of course, it makes an absolute disaster out of the entire car, but being that it's a bare shell pretty much, it's easy to clean. It was gonna be there for a few days, so I headed back to the shop, pulled out the parts car, and decided let's go ahead and lop off this rail. All right, we got her up on the lift, and as you can see, this thing is now in the same position that the black car is in, stripped down to a bare shell, minus the doors and some other goodies. I got a little bit bored, if you can't tell, waiting around for the black shell to be done at the sandblaster. While we wait, let's pop off that rail. I'm gonna try to save everything else, save the floor pan or the trunk pan, and save this rear section back here, just in case we may need that later on. I don't think we're going to, but we might. Now, of course, we cannot pull the new one off the parts car, like how we removed this one, because it would be unusable. I always like to mark my spot welds with a paint pen first so I know exactly where I'm sanding or drilling. In this case, I decided to use a drill bit just in case we needed to save this trunk pan, which, as you guys will see later on in the video, we definitely needed it. I cut a couple inches in front of the frame rail where we needed, got her loose, and she was ready to come off. So we got the piece off. There's actually 3 different pieces. There's an outer, there's a middle, and then there's an inner piece. So I need to separate all that and get this rear section ready to go. I had to clean up this frame rail a bit. There was a bit of excess material on the front end that we didn't need. So after a couple minutes, he's good to go. Well, here is our piece of metal. You can't really consider this a frame rail. This is straight up sheet metal. It's not thick. I can bend it with my fingers. But to build right, this needs to be replaced. So I'm stoked we got this off in one piece. Fairly good condition. I'll clean it up a bit. And as soon as that car gets back from the blaster, we'll get her on the lift and see about getting this thing installed. All right, boys, it's a couple hours later. Let's move on and start refurbishing and refinishing some goodies. All this stuff is gonna go a OEM color, and it's all gonna be powder coated, so it should be even stronger than factory. The color we're gonna be doing is Blackjack from Prismatic Powders. It's a very nice OEM color. You guys will see here in a minute. We need to get all of this paint stripped off, get them prepped out, and ready for powder coat. All right, let's get this process started. These are the first parts I'm fully restoring, and the first step in this process is to get all of the old paint or powder coat off. So they go in the stripper tank, and while they're in the stripper tank, I went ahead and pressed out some bushings out of the motor mounts. Here is how crusty they look out of the tank, and then it's on to the sandblaster. Right out of the sandblaster, we powder coat, and man oh man, these things turned out beautiful. When I said I was trying to build the world's nicest Evo, I wasn't lying. This is the standard for every single part for the car. Here's a knuckle, for example. All of the backing plates, windshield wiper arms. I love how these are very OEM looking, not the super high gloss that I usually do, but a very nice Blackjack, which is like a satin black. The filler neck, bam. Beautiful. And just like that, my friends, we have an Evo 8 shell fully blasted on the engine bay. I should have had him do the core support as well, but I did not. If I could go back in time, I would have that done too. Entire engine bay is bare, and if we take a peek on the underside, the whole entire undercarriage is also blasted. This is going to make life so easy. Very, very nice that they did not have to blast off any of the seam sealer. I went out and bought some seam sealer, had everything to redo all of the seam sealer on the entire undercarriage, but I don't have to because they did not blast it off. This is going to be beautiful, all said and done. Wheel wells completely blasted. Man, oh man, this is gonna be sweet. I got our rear rail all prepped out, ready to be welded in, but there's one thing I wanna take care of real quick before we do that, and that is the core support damage. So if you guys remember back, it popped out some of these spot welds up here. It's pretty clear actually what happened. Someone hooked here, which it looks like they hooked on pretty hard, and they yanked it out of a ditch. If it was stuck or something, could have easily popped all those spot welds out of there. So I'm just gonna set a strap from here back to here, get it back in place, and tack that core support back on where it needs to be. Once again, my come along comes in handy. We got this core support back to where it belongs. This thing is now perfectly straight. You can see the spot weld is back in the hole. That one's back in the hole. That one's back in the hole. And this one down here is also lined up perfectly. So let's weld her back in place, and the front is fixed. Grabbed a wire wheel, clean up the paint, clean up the rust, tacked her on, bam, good to go. From there, I decided let's go ahead and try to finish up this trunk pan. So I welded on a piece of metal to pull on with our come along. Things aren't really working out well, so we might just have to replace this freaking pan, which I do not want to do. Keep trying and trying and trying to fix this trunk pan, and I know what some of you guys are probably thinking, you're not gonna see it anyway, but to do this build right, I want that to be perfect. And it just keeps getting worse and worse. Now we're creating big old holes in it. I'm trying to act like this car's on a frame rack and pull it this way and hammer that out, but it keeps getting worse. I'm pretty sure the next best option is going to be to not replace the entire pan, but to section in a new chunk of the pan from the parts card. So that is exactly what we did. I went ahead and marked where I wanted to cut. This pan is in very, very good condition. One small dent we can take care of, but she's out and ready to go into the black shell. Pulled off all the seam sealer so we could get a nice fitment of the new pan exactly where we want to cut. Got her marked and ready to cut. As soon as we make this cut, there's no going back. We got a good pan right there, or part of a pan. And if you're wondering why I didn't replace the whole pan, it runs so far forward, all of this bracing would have to come out, and it runs all the way, if we pop open the back door, man, it's a mess in here, all the way to here. So there's a ton of extra work that would be needed. Of course, either way it works fine. This isn't part of the structural integrity of the car, so the only thing I'm worried about is getting that weld nice and ground down and the fitment perfect to where you can't tell it was ever done. Let's make some cuts. The first cut is always a bit nerve-wracking, but once we start, there ain't no going back. So let's get her done. Damaged pan was out, new pan ready to go in, and to my pleasant surprise, she fit like a glove. So I got the metal cleaned up, sprayed down a bit of weld through primer, and we were off to tacking on the new pan. I knew this was gonna be a long process, so much weld, so much grinding, but I knew the end result would turn out so much better than if we would have left the damaged pan on there. After many hours, we are completed with all the welding and grinding. Now there is some low spots, there's no high spots, but there's a few low spots we could fill with weld, or we could just make it a whole lot easier and honestly quite a bit better end result, and just go ahead and throw a little bit of body filler on the whole entire weld, just a tiny skim coat, and then sand it smooth and be good to go. As soon as we paint this car and we paint the trunk, you'll never know. I guess we'll see how good I am. You should be able to never tell that this was replaced. Before we do any filler work, we need to be done with welding. So that leaves us with welding in this rear guy frame rail. So this rail has to be in the exact perfect position, because if you take a look right here, that is where one of the control arms mount. And so if we're off on this guy, it's gonna suck for alignment purposes. So what I did is I'm starting out with bolting it on in a few different spots, making sure every single one of these holes line up before I go through and tack this guy on. And that is going to ensure that it's in their proper position. With the rail in the exact position that we wanted, I went ahead and welded her on. We do not have a spot gun welder here. The next best thing is just a nice little tack, and you guys will see when we undercut the car, it's gonna hide all of it anyway. All right guys, just like that, we are all done with our metal work besides the quarter panel. The current plan with the quarter is hopefully get the metal close enough to where we can just do a tiny bit of filler, nothing like it was before. And if that doesn't work, honestly, I don't really like the quarter that's on the parts car. It's rolled and pulled out, and there's quite a bit of filler in that one as well. If we do need to replace the quarter, I'm gonna have to order one in. Not a big deal. I'm just stoked that metal work for the frame, both front and back, and the trunk pan is done. We just need to come in with a little bit of filler to make it look nice and OEM, like no one ever was here messing around. Very pleased with the progress. I honestly did not think that it was gonna turn out, but I always keep in mind, like if someone else can do it, which I know there's other people that have the capability of doing what I just did, my mindset is if someone else can do it, I can figure it out. Maybe not right away, but eventually we'll get her sorted. Definitely need to get some primer on the bay and the undercarriage. It's been sitting for a little bit too long. It's already been like 24 hours, and I don't like it sitting that long because of course there's condensation in the air. Granted, it hasn't been outside at all, but still, we need to get some paint on her, or at least primer. Gonna wrap it up here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out, my friends, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of the world's crustiest Evo 8. Probably not the world's, but my crustiest Evo 8.